Welcome to the Good Divorce Show, where we can help you learn how to navigate the journey of divorce with less conflict, less debt, and equip you not to just get divorced, but also learn how to be divorced. Your host, certified divorce coach Karen McNenny, shares her wealth of knowledge, gets advice from other relationship experts, and interviews couples who learn how to have a good divorce, so you can too. Now here's your host, Karen.
Hello, listeners. Thanks for joining me here today on the Good Divorce Show. I am Karen McNenny, your good divorce coach, and we're going to do something different today. As you know, I'm usually talking with couples who've come out the other side of a good divorce, children, adult children of divorced families who have had a good run of it, and certainly professionals who want to help you in your divorce experience. But I believe that there is a cautionary tale that we really underestimate, myself included, as a divorced mother, about how the decisions and the behaviors, particularly in the early years, the foundation that we build for the family, how that affects the kids. And I think we just underestimate it. And a lot of times we brush it off like, kids are tough, they won't remember, they're resilient. So today I have asked a guest to come on the show to share a cautionary tale. Missy Miculka, her parents, they divorced 42 years ago. And there is still a shadow and an echo from the things that they did. And no shame here. All we're trying to do in the spirit of, and the words of Maya Angelou, is when we know better, we do better. And here on the Good Divorce Show, we're just here to educate so that you do know better and that you can make different choices. So welcome to the show, Missy Miculka.
Thank you so much for having me here today, Karen.
And thanks for agreeing to share your private and precious story as a child of divorce. And I think we'll just start at the beginning and give us a little bit of context of kind of the shape of your family, were there siblings, how old you all were, the house and the spirit of the family before this pivotal moment happened for each of you.
Okay. Well, I was pretty young, so I don't have a lot of details about the before, but I was about 6 or 7 when my parents divorced. I was an only child. But if I can back up just for a second, because I kind of want to talk about how we came together, because I think it's an important part of this story.
That's great.
Karen and I met through some mutual friends, and she told me what she does, and I was intrigued. And so I immediately went home and listened to every podcast I could get my hands on that she has recorded. And I found myself in the first episode just crying 3 times. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is touching some really deep parts in me that are still healing from the divorce that happened 40 some years ago. So listening to you talk about a good divorce was healing, because I am the child of a bad divorce, not bad people, but a bad divorce. I love both of my parents desperately. But this brought up for me so many feelings that I didn't even know I was allowed to have, and things I didn't even know that I wish I had or not had happen during my parents' divorce, and as an almost 50-year-old woman. So I just think that your message and the way that you're talking about divorce is really helping people to heal from the long shadow of divorce, as you call it. And I think that's a really appropriate term for it. So yeah, my background, it was ugly. There was lots of fighting, lots of crying, lots of driving off in anger, and I could feel it, even though my parents tried to keep it from me, but it has a way of permeating a young child.
Yeah. I just want to say thank you, Missy.
Yeah, of
We're
course.
celebrating the good divorce movement, and it is a movement, and there are many pioneers around the country that include lawyers who no longer want to litigate, and they become divorce coaches and mediators, and therapists who want to help people after couples counseling makes it clear, and child life specialists and therapists. So there's a gang of us out there disrupting the divorce industry as we've known it. And like you said, I didn't even know there could be a different way. So we're here to really broadcast that. And I'll add, as Missy and I were getting to know each other, what peaked on my end of the conversation is Missy she's a menopause midwife, working with men and women through the hormonal changes during a period of time where a lot of divorce also tends to happen. And do you find a correlation there?
I do. I do. I've looked up the data and it does show they call it gray divorce, and there is definitely a peak. I don't have the numbers with me today, but there is definitely a peak at that time, when the kids are in their teens and then people are going through perimenopause and going into menopause and menopause, because that is a thing. We find that there is a spike in divorce. And so sometimes hormones play a very large role. And so if people need help with that, please add that in as a piece of your team that's going to help you have a good divorce or figure out how to stay together.
And this spirit of team, it goes beyond a lawyer. And
Yes.
I'm here to say we need the wisdom of lawyers. We need their skills and knowledge
Hmm.
around the law. But generally speaking, I think their participation, their role in divorce is oversized. It's supersized.
Hmm.
We need to right size it and build out that team, which are financial support folks, real estate agents, maybe it's a tax attorney, it's a coach, it's a consultant like myself, folks like Missy, who not only can help you with your hormones, but if you're in Missoula, Montana, she'll put you on her massage table and give you a whole nother part of wellness and self-care during this time. Just will you let people know where they can find you professionally on that side of your professional life before we dive into your childhood?
Yes, absolutely. So they can find me. My website is ohm406.com. And I do my own podcast called The Menopause Midwife. You can find it anywhere else you find your podcast. I'm also on Instagram and I post fairly often. It's called My Menopause Midwife. And I do little bits of things that, you might be able to watch and find out the best way to use estrogen in your body if you want to, or on your face. So all kinds of fun things. And then you can also find me at on TikTok at the Menopause Midwife. So I'm on Linktree, so you can find me all over the place.
Wonderful. And we'll make sure to reiterate that before we say goodbye today, and it'll be in the show notes.
Thank you.
Such a wonderful resource.
Thank you.
So going back, I want to start with this phrase of kids are resilient. They'll be fine, even to their faces, like, it's okay, it's okay. And, I often say, like, don't gaslight your children
Hmm.
out of their emotions. Big emotions are happening. And I think sometimes, I'll speak from the parent, the divorced mom, that we have a guilt and we don't want our kids to be damaged and hurt and sad by all of this. But the reality is they are. So can you go back into your own reserves of memory and when you might have heard those things? And again, speaking right to the heart of parents before, during, after divorce, what they should be thinking about around language and the emotional experience of their children.
Definitely. I can't think of anything specifically. I think because I was so young, and I think that I have maybe stuffed some of those memories. And I just, frankly, I was kind of surprised as I've been thinking about this. I don't have a lot of memories from that time. I have brief memories, and they're not super pleasant. And so I think maybe my brain and my emotions were protecting me at that time. So what I did do though is I kind of wrote my thoughts down. So if you don't mind, if I'll kind of share my first number one cautionary tale with your listeners, if
That would
that's
be
okay.
great. Lay it on.
Okay. Just
We're
so I
all
don't forget
ears.
anything. So, well meaning people say things like, she's resilient. She'll be fine. She knows you both love her. She still has the best of both worlds, which I did. I have two amazing parents who love me. But these words and sentiments were not helpful. Well, why not? But these sayings don't let kids be sad, mad, angry, and grieve. It's hard enough for kids to know that their parents are suffering because kids already feel like they have to try to not solve, but to be the salve for both of their parents. And kids don't get to grieve their own loss. So even if the divorce is for the best, I just realized literally 2 months ago at 48 years old, after listening to your show, that this happened to me, that I never got to grieve my loss. And I was always trying to make it feel okay to my parents. I was always under the impression that these sayings were a kindness from others and that they were okay, which I think people are well-meaning, but really in a way these are statements are gaslighting, like you already mentioned, gaslighting the true feelings that are happening in young humans. And I realize that it's impossible to prevent or control what other people say to your kids, but this is where parents can, and I think need, to open the conversation up with their kids about being mad, sad, scared, and grieving. And then just to help them know that it's okay to feel this way and that the kids don't have to make the parents feel better. And so I think it's also a really great time to bring in a therapist if you don't already have one, so that your kiddo has a place to explore these feelings. So I'm not sure what better language is in this uncomfortable setting when you find out that someone's getting divorced and you know they have kids and you love their kids and you want to say something. I don't know, Karen, maybe you have some great language around this with your experience, but I was hoping to come up with a solution, but I didn't have one.
Well, I think your words are full of a lot of wisdom, Missy, and it's not always what we do that matters, it's what we don't do.
Mm-hmm.
And your messaging really is about a little less of putting a giant Band-Aid on a gaping wound.
Mm-hmm.
Just acknowledging the wound. And in terms of communication with kids, like my clients and I, we spend a lot of time setting the stage for that first conversation. My ideal clients are the two parents who've just decided that it's become clear. We're at the fork in the road. We're going to get divorced. And everyone's like, okay, call a lawyer. I'm like, no, don't. That's not your first call. Call a Karen, call a good one, call a coach, call your therapist, right? But even like couples therapists, in my situation, we were graduated from couples therapy. Like, our work here is done. I'm like, can you keep working with this? Like, there's a lot of conversations we need to have.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, well, not really. It's kind of out of my expertise. So thank goodness divorce coaching and a lot of mental health professionals are coming into this arena. And so we spend a lot of time considering what's the conversation we're going to have with those children. And if there's a 13-year-old and an 18-year-old in the house, it's probably two different conversations that merge, usually giving the older children an opportunity to have their experience and questions, because we also want our language to be age appropriate. So that's something to think about. I might say to my 6-year-old, you probably have noticed mom and dad are just grumpy a lot. We're just grumpy with each other. Yeah, you guys are really grumpy. Whereas a young adult child, right? I'm not going to burden them with everything under the water, right? But I would probably use more direct language that is age appropriate to them. And realizing that this is not a one and done conversation. And maybe, it sounds like even the moment that your parents were telling you, Missy, might be clouded. Like, was it a moment? But it's not one conversation. And especially when you start to become a two-home family and children are living in these two different habitats, that you check in regularly.
Mm-hmm.
How's it going in two homes? Do you have what you need? What could your, mom and I do differently?
Mm-hmm.
Do you wish the schedule were different, right? Like, so it's not just something that's happening to them, but it's something that we're doing with them. And it allows them to have agency in this experience, and that they know there's a mechanism for feedback. Because I think you're right. Sometimes kids, like the parentification is what we call it. Like, I can't be sad because my parents are sad and I have to just put up with it. And it doesn't matter whether or not I want to transition on Sunday night because I'm in the middle of building a puzzle in my room or a fort in the basement. I have to go. And when do you know it's safe to just be able to express those things to your parents? And then for the parents to know that it's in the best interest of your children to be flexible and to hear. So maybe you have some thoughts or response to that, Missy?
Well, I just think you just responded to it beautifully. And it just brings up that little girl inside of me. Like, I wish that she had had that opportunity to be not what you called it, parentification.
Yeah,
Is that
you end up parenting your parents.
And even though they're both very mature adults, but they didn't have the tools or the help to be able to go through this in a better way either. And so I know that they were doing the best that they could at the time. Um, but it doesn't mitigate the mess that it made afterwards.
And
So,
what you carry through your life and through your
mhm,
relationships. So this is something I really emphasize with clients is how you move into this renovation, right? Not a destruction, not a tear down.
mhm,
We're renovating your relationship. Marriage is done, not your relationship. That's probably the biggest thing I repeat all the time. And so in that process, making sure that we don't put adult things on the kids, even when they start asking, well, where am I going to live? And do I get to go on the same bus? And will I see my friends? And will I have, and then the right answer is like, you don't even have to worry about those things because
right.
those are adult worries. And you still
Yeah.
have two adult parents. Those are parent problems. And just like we have before, we're going to continue to take care of the parent problems. So we actively alleviate that burden from the children. So
Yeah.
that, like you said, you ended up being kind of um, the the salve, the salve.
Yeah.
I just kind of see this like nice lotiony. I got to keep everybody happy. And
Mhm.
as only child, oh my goodness,
Mhm.
the, kind of the isolation in your story as the child. Were you moving between your parents' homes?
I did. I did every Thursday with my dad and every other weekend with my dad. And that was, when I was younger, it was okay. As I got older, it got really tough for me because I was a teenager and I wanted my favorite jeans, but I forgot to pack them, or they were at mom's house, or they were, and so that got tricky for sure. And I definitely wanted to be with my dad, but I didn't want to stay the night anymore. And I remember that really hurt his feelings. And so I think that went on longer than it should have because I was not wanting to hurt his feelings.
Right. And did the schedule stay all the way through high school, one Thursday night and every other weekend?
Yes,
Or
it did.
changed?
It never changed. No. So, and my parents didn't fight about that. That was always just, that was the way it was. And they both really respected each other with that. But it was a weird schedule. I don't
And
know that it
it's
was a fit.
still common. And
Is it?
dads, I'm talking to your heart. I think
Mhm.
sometimes they get the short end of the stick
Oh,
and
definitely.
there's a mom bias. And it was just the standard practice. You'll get one
Mhm.
night a week and every other weekend.
Mhm.
And maybe because I've dated a lot of divorced dads in the 13 years since I've been divorced, they're like, I just want to be a dad, not just an ATM.
Yeah.
I want time with my children. And we know there's empirical data how important it is for kids to have equal access to both parents when
Yeah.
it's healthy, when it's safe. Of course, there's always a
Yep.
caveat, but we're just talking about the normal neurotics.
Right.
Like my family. And I recently was working with a family who, again, the child said, I will see you. We have activities. I'll come for dinner on these nights. We'll do homework projects, but I do not want to schlep my stuff around anymore. It just needs to be in one
Mhm.
place. My own
Yeah.
children, post COVID, we went from 1 week. They came to us and said, can we do a 2 week stretch just so we feel like we can land? And
Mhm.
when my daughter went off to college, her younger brother is like, can I do a month at a time? Because I built this amazing computer system, and in order to like take it apart and put it back, like it has to be worth it, if you will.
Yeah.
And again, these parenting plans are written, and we think that there's some kind of parenting plan police out there checking off the Thursday night and you're in charge, parents.
Right.
You can liberate that parenting plan. It only exists if you can agree or if someone goes off course in a way that it wasn't the agreement. The best parenting plan is the one that goes in the drawer and never gets referenced again
Yeah.
because it's just a legal document for grown-ups who can't be grown up.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me that, and I just want to touch on for a second what you said about the dads. Like, I know that my dad feels ripped off from time with me.
Yep.
And I think what that did was it kind of created a little bit of a wall between he and I because he had to protect himself from his sadness of not being able to see me as much as he wanted to. And so I think that it created a lack of connection between he and I. And
I
that
don't know how it wouldn't. That seems
right. And so that kind of exists to this day, and it makes me really sad, and I think it makes him really sad. And it's not that we don't love each other, but we didn't get a chance to, like you said, land together. So he never really got to parent me. Like he was just like the Disneyland dad. I mean, he wasn't. He was definitely involved and cared, but he didn't get a chance to establish, I don't even know what it is, maybe routines with me that were meaningful.
Well, even again, that school week, every day, packing the lunches, sending you off, homework afterwards, and having those bonding attachment, moments. And we talk a lot about attachment and attachment theory in divorce. And what can happen is that when healthy attachment doesn't happen in childhood, that starts to play out in our adult life relationships. And we either get really anxious attachment style, maybe, or avoidant attachment style, because either I'm afraid no one's ever going to be there and we grab, or I don't trust anyone's ever going to be there. So keep your distance. Very simplified. That's one of the things that can happen. I don't know if you recognize any of that in your own life or anything you'd want to share about, again, the echo of the divorce experience in your adult life.
Oh, absolutely. The echo is there. And it's something that my husband and I work through with our therapist, because I feel that maybe I'm going to use the word rejection. I think because I don't think it was meant as rejection, but I think it feels like rejection as a child. And then as an adult, you kind of have that in your mind that, oh, if someone isn't giving me as much attention as I need, or the right kind of attention, I'm not doing my part enough. And so you do some, I don't want to say clinging. I don't know what it's called. I'm still kind of working through what that looks like, but I'm able to kind of put my finger on some of that now, the need that I have to fill that gap. And so my husband's understanding that too. And so that's been actually really helpful for us as we work through this stage of marriage. We've been married for 26 years.
Yeah.
Or 25 years. I can't remember. It's a lot of years. And everybody goes through an upheaval in this time. And so us, like everybody else, is working through some stuff, some renegotiation, some reevaluation of what our relationship looks like. And this has really come up for us, for me, especially being a child of divorce.
And in your particular story, there's a gendered issue, and not all marriages and not all parents are heterosexual in traditional ways we think about it. But for you, because your father was the absent one, and it's always important, that attachment. And fathers and daughters. So it seems completely natural and normal that as you then build a relationship with your husband, that again, you didn't have that same sort of practice and stability and foundation and trust and all the things that come when you do homework together every day, when you're telling the stories at night, when it's the morning and you're crabby and you have to push against, like, all those rites of passage and those stages of development that come through the parent child experience. And it's one thing to have a completely absent parent, but it's another to have really not even a part-time parent, an occasional parent, and how a child tries to wrap their head around that. And it's a shift now. That's not as common, that dads just automatically get their one day and their weekend. And I certainly don't support that as the default.
Yeah.
And good for you.
It seems like there's so many better ways to do it for the long term, and to get those rites of passage with, and events that happen during a normal day and a normal week.
Before we head into our break, I want to go back to this, when the child has to be the grown-up, when the child has to care more for the parent. And you talked about your dad's sadness that maybe you can see now. And of course, that can be projected onto the other parent, the resentment and bitterness, even if it was decided by the courts, even if this was just how we used to do divorce, which is bad. Really, there's and it impacts society. It isn't just this family. It's now you, Missy, as an adult woman and a wife and a mother and a professional and a businesswoman, right? This is why we need to get it right and do it different from the ground up. And I just wonder if there were other moments And if there aren't specific moments, but that sense of how you had to care and you spent more time in your mother's home and being protective or being well behaved, how did it show up for you in that I may be being expected either internally or externally to be a little bit more grown up than my child self? I didn't have permission to be.
Oh, wow. That's a big one. I could dig on that one for probably a while, but I was a very well-behaved child. I did not ever rock the boat, even if I wanted to. Um, and so I think that, I had to wait a lot at appointments or this or that, and waiting for in between going from parent to parent. Um, and I just knew that I needed to not be disruptive. And so I suffered. And I don't mean suffer in I don't want to take away from people who've truly suffered with violence and things like that. Nobody was hurting me, but I think I tolerated a lot of things that I can't imagine making my kids tolerate at this point. And yeah, I can't. I'm sorry, I'm a little on the spot with that question, which I love that question. I just can't think of examples, but that is
Yeah.
definitely a thing. I
Mhm.
felt like when I became a mother and I saw how my son was, my first child, my son was very immature at these junctures where I remember myself having to be so mature. I was like, what is going on? But then I remembered, oh, yeah, I had to grow up a little too fast. And
Mm.
so this is really great that he's being ridiculous and silly and loud. And I was not loud. I was very shy, which people who know me as an adult would kind of giggle at that. But when I was little, I was very, very shy. And I think it was my way of kind of protecting myself, keeping myself
Mm.
quiet and well behaved, so
Mm.
that my parents didn't have to deal with more, problems.
Mhm. Just I wanna go down one more pathway
Hmm.
in this two household life and your thoughts around even the language we use. Well, your mother, your father. And when we live together, like, hey, mom, mom's going to pick you up, not your mother will be picking you up. Like the tone, the language. What do you have to say about that, Missy?
Oh my goodness. Okay, tone and language is huge. One of the things that was the hardest for me was anytime my dad would talk about my mom, it was your mother. And it was as though he was choking on the words every time he said them. Um, and I would ask everybody to please use the familiar. It may be hard at first, but I promise it'll go miles for your kids because it will help them feel comfortable sharing both parts of their life with you. And this concept of living half lives was really highlighted in your conversation with Ms. McGee. I'm sorry, I forgot her
Yeah,
first name.
Christina McGee. And
Christina
she's
McGee.
a amazing pioneer in this movement.
Oh my goodness. I mean, she just broke that open for me. Your conversation did. It was like, it is like living a life that you can't share with your other parent. So, and because every person is half one parent and half the other. And so if you go home to share with your dad about what you did with your mom that you really loved, you're going to cut pieces out. You're going to start holding back because you see them, you see their face change, you hear the tone change, the words physically change to your mother, or the tone is so different when you start talking about those things or you get ignored. All of those things happen to me on the
Mhm.
regular basis. And I don't believe that my dad was being mean to me. I believe that he was trying to preserve his own pain. And it just felt awful to him. But I started just cutting myself in half and not sharing those things with him. And therefore taking that wall that we already talked about that I think we built or had built for us by the courts and the time, and just made it even thicker and higher.
Right.
And that's not okay. So I would just ask people to please, 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 as your second cautionary tale, is use the familiar, not your mother, your father. Your tone and your word choices, they mean so much and they impart so much to your kids. So when I hear my dad say your mother, even to this day, it just squeezes on that anxiety button inside of me. So, yeah.
Sometimes I think parents can fall into a dynamic of competition.
Yeah.
I want to be loved more. I'm going to do more for you. I don't want to hear about, as if you don't want the other parent to succeed in their parenting role.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think that can come out of damaging divorces that automatically put two parents in an adversarial position. And that is what the legal system does. As soon as you call two lawyers, you're in a battle. Unless it's a
Right.
cooperative or a collaborative process, and those rare lawyers who really neutralize, but they are trained to represent and fight for their client. And so they have to stay on the other side, and things that weren't a problem can become a problem. And all that damage that comes out of those adversarial and litigated divorces, it leaves a ruins for the family, and it's hard to sometimes move through that. And for those of you who maybe have come through a dumpster fire of a divorce, I like to say it's never too late to have a good divorce. It never, never is. And you can elevate beyond that and celebrate your child. You know, Christina McGee, one of the things she says is, you just need to love your child more than you hate their other parent.
That is so true.
Most of us can say, oh, I totally love my child, even more than that disdain or that irritation. And that is asking a lot for some folks. But Missy Miculka is here today asking you to do that very thing. And as an adult child of divorce, we are digging into her story and her perspective and the memories. So grateful. We're going to come back from the break and talk a little bit about introducing new people into the family and how the families grow and how that also deeply affects the child. Stay tuned.
Are you thinking about getting divorced? Before you call a lawyer, call the Good Divorce Coach, Karen McNenny, a certified divorce counselor, co-parenting specialist, and mediator. Karen's signature Good Divorce experience will guide you through your divorce journey, from the day you make that difficult decision to the day the decree is signed, all for a predictable fee. The Good Divorce Coach will teach you and your partner how to get divorced and be divorced with less conflict and less debt. Visit thegooddivorcecoach.com to get in touch with Karen.
Now, back to the show with Karen.
Thanks for staying with us today here on the Good Divorce Show. We are chatting with adult child of divorce, Missy Miculka. She is also an extraordinary menopause midwife and helps people manage their hormones and their wellness through transformation. And we all know divorce is a very significant transformation. And today she's bringing her wisdom, her story, and her heart as you reflect on your own experience as a child of divorce, and some cautionary tale and some, well, direct requests of what you would like to ask of other divorced parents to do. Welcome back to the show, Missy.
Thank you.
So often, post-divorce, families grow, they morph, they become blended. There's step kids, there might be new biological kids, new partners. And I just want to ask you to reflect a little bit on how that went in your family, what you noticed, how it affected you. And now as an adult, what recommendations would you give to parents who are facing their own new relationships?
Well, I have a lot to say about that.
Bring it, sister.
Yeah, I mean, I am going to read from my notes again, just because this is a really loaded topic, I think. And so I'm going to read my notes, and then I think we could probably have a conversation around it. So, my cautionary tale about introducing the next person is this. In most cases, don't date and introduce or marry quickly. And for God's sakes, when you do introduce them, if your kid or kids does not like the person, please listen to them. Your kiddo, they might have a sixth sense. I did. My mom was in another relationship before the divorce was final, and I did not like the man. I told my mom and I told the man. She married him anyway, and it turned out he was a narcissistic, abusive human. And he's still that way, mostly emotional, but occasionally physical, not to me, but to my siblings that came on the scene. So my mom and him had 5 kids in 7 years after they got married. So not only did I gain a stepfather who I did not like at all, I got 5 siblings who I love to pieces, but that's a lot of change. So
Oh, goodness.
you might say, I can't let my kids decide who I get together with or who they don't get to choose who I love or whatever. I guess I would just say I kind of disagree that kids are really smart. And if you're bringing someone into the home, I think they need to feel safe and comfortable too. And truly, I only ever wanted my parents to be happy. I think a lot of parents say, oh, well, my kid won't like anyone that I bring home. I don't think that that's true because both of my parents now are finally married to the loves of their life. And it makes me so happy for them. It really, truly does. So, Karen says, in her Good Divorce Show suggestions to wait at least 6 to 9 months before you even introduce someone. And I think that is such good advice because this time frame clarifies a lot of things. It's a good distance away from the trauma of the initial part of the divorce, and it's a good distance away from the butterflies of a new relationship. So it seems like if people take this bit of time getting to know themselves before jumping right back into a relationship, they might make better choices and not repeat some of the same mistakes as previous relationships or make other really big bad choices, excuse me. So I honor and love your recommendation to people about this. And I think it's tough because sometimes the reason people get divorced is because of infidelity. And then there's that relationship that's already there. And then people move into that relationship as their next marriage. And boy,
Mom.
that like my mom. And that is just fraught. And I don't know that goes well very many times.
My training as a therapist is spinning around the importance of one thing ending before another thing beginning.
Yes.
To fully grieve and push through that. And you so wisely said, it's valuable because you're just coming out of a relationship that did dissolve. So don't get back on the same merry-go-round. And if you're quick to the draw, chances are you haven't done that reflective time. And I'm going to yes and on time frame. I actually recommend post-divorce, you wait 12 to 18 months before you lock into a long-term relationship again. It takes about a year, that year of all the firsts, to go through grief, to reorient, to financially find your footing, for the kids to adjust to this new lifestyle, right? Don't change too many things at once, and a lot has already changed. So there is a therapeutic wisdom in waiting 12 to 18 months. Now, a girl's got to eat. So there might be, and I talk about the divorgasmic era, post-divorce, when you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to date again and I'm going to sleep with other people and I never thought I would, and I'm out and I've got freedom. And sometimes that's how it goes. I have no judgment about any of that. I'm just giving you the caution that that isn't necessarily the time to double down on another long-term relationship. And then when you start a relationship that you really like, this is going to stick, whether that's 5 years post-divorce. I'm 13 years post-divorce. My children have been introduced to 2 people that I've dated in that time. And I did take a long chunk of time, but the recommendation is once you start a long-term relationship that you wait 6 to 9 months to introduce the kids to that person. Otherwise, you start getting a swinging door, potentially. And again, the biology and the data will show us that there's this wonderful flood of love drugs. And it is, you are a drugged up person when you are falling in love. And it's fabulous and there's nothing like it. But we can't fully trust it until we move into that next phase of what is the reality? Are we compatible? Are we compatible with our kids? And when you date someone, you don't just date the person, you do date their children and vice versa. And you're going to weave together a life again. That compatibility matters. So making sure that it's going to stick, making sure that it's solid, Because again, what can happen is you can screw up the attachment style of your children. And you're falling in love with someone and they come on the scene 3 months in and they bring their kids and everyone starts attaching. And then at 6 months, you see the writing on the wall and you break up. And now the kids are also in the breakup with that person and those other children that they might have started to already build a sibling bond, and off they go, and then rinse and repeat. And there are families and individuals who do a rinse and repeat, and they think, oh, it's just me. I'm just dating and it's not a big deal and it doesn't matter. Heavens, it matters, because that's attach, detach, attach, detach. And that cycle, once again, can really lead to either avoidant or anxious attachment styles. And then there's all sorts of commentary about how you introduce. And that, I call it the drip, drip, drip cascade. Not first introduction at the dining room table and they're going to spend the night. There's other ways to ease into, like you did. And maybe you're the person, you've been dating them for 9 months and you're deep in. Well, it's a fresh start for your kids. So how did you begin that dating? Probably a cup of coffee, a dog walk, right? A phone call, very slowly trickling in. Tell us about you mentioned these 5 siblings.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not they were also, well, they were biological children. So then those parents divorced. And then what happened to those relationships? It sounds like an interesting family tree, Missy. I guess that's kind of what I want you to draw out for us, and how that has impacted your life.
Well, interestingly, so the man that my mom married and had my siblings with, he had left 4 children from a previous marriage. So I have 4 step siblings that I've never met. And then I had my 5 siblings, half siblings that I had after he married my mom. And then they divorced when I was about 19. And so my siblings are children of divorce. And then he never remarried. He is currently living with my oldest little brother. But yeah,
he's still in the picture.
Yeah. That is a whole nother interesting dynamic where he was not good to them. And now they are, my brothers in particular are, I want to say, like circling the wagons around him. It's kind of a strange dynamic, but I think everybody wants their parents, and I think that's what's happening. So yeah, the kids were in their teens. My siblings are much younger than me, so they were in their early teens when he and my mom divorced. And so I think, they're all kind of youngly married with littles, and so they're going to be dealing with this stuff probably as they hit middle age too, or if their relationships fall apart, which I don't wish on them, but we just know life happens. So
well, you were the first to launch out of the house and out of kind of that family network. What was your launch? Was it school, an apartment, far away? I've watched my kids launch, and my daughter, they went from kindergarten to college, and her dorm room was the first time she's like, oh, I live in the same place every day, every week, all month. I don't have to think about it.
Yeah,
you're solid.
That is actually pretty amazing. I launched straight into renting a room from a friend's mom and that lived nearby, both of my parents. And I went straight into a midwifery internship and apprenticeship. And so I was super busy, didn't really think about any of this stuff at all. And, it's funny that you bring that up, because the woman who I rented a room from, I'm going to do a little shout out to Chelsea McGraw, because she gave me one of the biggest gifts of my life. I'm actually going to get all teary. She invited my parents to come to her house when I turned 20 and have dinner with me and her. And it was the only time I remember, as in all my memory, of spending time with my parents that was actually not awkward. Somehow she was able to orchestrate that for me. And to this day, obviously, it creates a lot of emotion because it was really special. So sorry, I didn't expect all that to come up, but yeah, it was really a special moment. They were in my home and they behaved themselves, and it was really lovely to have them to myself.
I celebrate these big emotions, because parents that are listening right now, who think it doesn't matter, or are going to bring the pouty, pissy attitude to the birthday party, or just not show up, or not sit together in the bleachers. Like, again, to what end? Because those actions and choices and behaviors, they are still with you.
Yep.
One 20-year-old birthday memory of your parents being together and it being about you, not about their relationship.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about. Are there you have some thoughts about this and the kids becoming uncomfortable. And I want to go back to these beautiful written thoughts that you brought to the podcast today on this topic of how you have to rise above your own personal pain as a parent to just be the parent.
Yes. Yes. I think that I like to say, please don't ever make your kids uncomfortable when you are around each other. I really don't care as an adult now how uncomfortable you are as another adult. It's really up to you, both of you adults, to put on your best show. Even if you have to fake it till you make it, this is for your kids. So be kind, be polite. And like I said, I had this one memory, but to this day, in any other circumstance, if my parents are in the same room, I have intense anxiety. My dad is super cold and awkward, and my mom overcompensates, trying to be super nice and friendly. So it's still a mess. I just wish they could be genuinely polite with each other. And that meaning that my dad doesn't have to remind my mom that he's still mad at her 40 years later by being grumpy and awkward with her. And my mom doesn't need to try to be my dad's best friend to smooth it all over. So, I'm still grappling with all of this. And I think what you said with the other guest, that, you have to love your kids more than you hate your ex.
Yeah.
And those are such words of wisdom.
And again, you are 48. Your parents divorced at 6. And those experiences still are raw inside of you. And there is still a wound because of those choices. And the other thing we talk about is the child is a part of both of you. They are a biological phenomena of both parents, and they love both of you. Say more about giving permission. You talked a little bit about, I want to be able to celebrate my whole life in both houses. I don't want to have to compartmentalize all the time to protect their feelings because they're going to be pissed that I had a great time with dad over the weekend, right? But why it matters to the child who identifies with both parents.
I think it matters because it's a cutting in half of yourself. And you start like censoring yourself around your parents. And I think, when you become a teenager, you censor yourself all the time just because you're a teenager, and that's how that natural process happens. But when you are a child of divorce and at a young age, and I was only 6 or 7, I started censoring myself very, very young. And I feel like even to this day, sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, I never told my mom that, or I never told my dad that. And they'll be surprised to hear a story from me. And it's because I hid it, because it was a censoring. And I think that maybe, and I'm just kind of thinking about this now on the spot, is that I'm wondering if I censored more than I even needed to, because I just didn't have the awareness or the maturity to know what to censor and how much. And so maybe I censored more. And my parents could have been more in tune with me if I had been able to feel like I could share more with them.
Absolutely. And parents that are listening, it's one thing, here's the child who's trying to figure out, what can I tell? What can I not tell? How is it going to affect them, right? We always say we don't want the child to be the mediator, the negotiator, the go-between, the spy. Like, it is not their role. But you, as a parent, can go to the child and say, I heard you had a great time with your dad this weekend. Tell me all about it. Or, I heard you had a great time with your dad this weekend. Anything you want to share? And that automatically is giving permission to the child to know it's safe. They're curious. They want to know. They're not telling me they don't want to know. They're actually taking the lead to show the child the path to non-censorship.
Yes. And I think one little caveat to that I think some people could fall prey to, and I think they really, if they do feel like this is them, they might have to really dig deep inside about when they ask. But some parents are mining for information.
Digging. Yep.
Yeah. And that kids can feel that. And so I just want to caution against that too. So your intention is very important and your tone. Kids are so intuitive. And I think we dumb it out of them as they get older, but really honor your kiddos as people who are paying attention. They know, they feel, they just don't know what to do with all those big feelings.
Yeah.
And so,
And
yeah.
actually giving them language.
Yes.
My wise daughter, Sophia, called me out when I was on a rant about dad. And she's like, you know what? I just don't even want to hear it. I don't like it. And I appreciate that we have a trusting, open relationship. And again, the conversation about being a two-family household has always been alive and active. We don't act like it's not what we're about. It's how our family's structured. So how do we become a learning family in that process?
Mm-hmm.
And then they grabbed hold of the phrase. If I said, so is dad such and such and such? Hey, did dad such and such and such? You'll say, sounds like a great question for dad.
Oh, I love that.
Just sidesteps it completely. She does it when I ask about her brother too. Sounds like you should ask Patrick that. Like we talked about triangulation as something that can happen across two homes. When you educate, again, we don't know how to do this. This is why the Good Divorce show exists and the Good Divorce experience. And I tell my clients, okay, now we're going to go to divorce school and I'll graduate you and hopefully you'll learn how to be a divorced family. Lawyers will get you divorced. There is a whole movement of us trying to help you learn how to be a healthy, thriving divorced family. And one of those things is educating everybody around triangulation and how you can get caught in it and the damage that it can do. And for those of you not familiar with that phrase, really think of a triangle and mom and dad are on 2 points and the child's on another point, and either the kid will start playing you against each other, which can happen during intact family living, right? But there's children who will flex that power because they know their parents are not unified. So they'll play them against each other. Or we know that it's so broken between the parents that the child ends up being the bridge, and that bridge might not look or feel very good. Giving education, giving tools, giving permission. These would be the things that I would hope you would take away from Missy's experience, such a raw confession of a child of divorce. And as we wrap up, Missy, I'm wondering if there's anything we haven't talked about that you want to say to the parents listening, an umbrella message and caution, point them in the right direction.
Oh my goodness. If you can work with Karen, if you are going through a divorce and you can have her help guiding you through this, I would just say, please do, because this is something that I think it's money. Oh, I'm sorry. My dog's just, somebody just came to the door.
Keep the dog on the show.
We love the dogs. But I would just say this is like the money spent and the time spent will literally help your child as they get older and have their own relationships. And so whatever you're showing and doing right now to your kids, to your ex or soon to be ex, and I actually even hate that word because I think it X's people out of your life. So your former partner or the partner that you're separating from.
Or their name.
Or their, whatever their name is. Yeah.
My first husband.
Yeah.
He is my first husband. There haven't been others, but my first husband, right?
Yeah.
Language.
Language is so important. It matters so much in the triangulation that you bring up. I mean, we didn't even touch on that. That literally my mom asked me a question for my dad the other day that had to do with his business. And I said to her, for the first time in my life, I said, wow, that sounds like a question for my dad.
Now,
why don't you call him at 48 years old? Yes. And you know what? She received it really well. And then she let it go. Or I don't know if she called him. I don't care because it's not mine. So anyway, please don't make your kids wait till they're 48 to figure this stuff out, and get some help. with Karen or with someone like Karen because it is invaluable. And I think it'll make you happier too. But it also will just really help protect your kiddos through this process.
Well, thank you for that endorsement, Missy. And I do tell my clients that I don't work for them. I work for their kids.
Mm-hmm.
My clients are the kids, and I'm here to protect your future.
Yeah.
That's the
So
part
true.
that matters. We cannot fix the past. It
No.
already did all that trouble. So
Mhm.
going forward, do no more harm.
Yes.
And we're going to renovate your family.
Yeah.
It's still a family, and it is a forever relationship.
Yep.
If you entangled your DNA, that's a long, long journey. What do you want to look like? Design your divorce. And again, whether it's with me or another coach, we're coming up out of the woodwork everywhere. Google it up, find someone locally, reach out to me for other resources. Thank you so much, Missy Miculka, not only child of divorce, but wise woman, entrepreneur. Again, remind us about the services that you're providing to all of us beautiful, messy, wounded, aging people out there in the world.
Well, I love to support and care for the people in my practice. I take care of mostly women in the perimenopause and menopause intersection of life, but I will see men as well. And we work with bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. We also work with nutrition, and I love to have kind of wraparound care. I also am a massage therapist and I use a red light and I have an infrared sauna. So like Karen said, if you're in Missoula, check me out. But really, if you ever need to just chat with someone about the health component of this, I'm available and I'm really accessible because to me, these things need to be accessible to women and to families. And so I'm here. Check me out if you ever want to see if I'm a fit for you.
Give us your website one more time, Missy.
Yes, I'm at ohm406.com.
Wonderful. And listeners, I just want to celebrate your intent today of taking time to learn how to be a healthy, functional family, even through divorce, that you care enough to do it differently. And one family at a time, we are creating a movement of more dignified divorce with less debt and despair. And remember, everything will be okay in the end. And if it's not okay, it is not the end.
Thanks for listening. Do you have questions or thoughts about this week's episode? Let us know by following the Good Divorce Coach on Facebook and Instagram at Good Divorce Coach. And leave a comment. And be sure to tune in every Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific or listen anytime wherever you get your podcasts.